Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Merril Hoge is in the house. I'm sure you've seen him on the gridiron for many, many years. I'm sure you've seen him on TV as an NFL analyst, or maybe you've picked up one of his books. Merril Hoge is founder of Find a Way. And Merril, just want to say thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So I got connected with you on LinkedIn and discovered that you've got a podcast, you've written some books. Obviously, people have seen you on TV, they've seen you on the football field. We're going to get to all that good stuff. But before we do, I want to hear your story because there's one thing I found very quickly is Find a Way is more than just 3 words. There's a lot more to it. So let's start with your story. Tell me about your journey, how you made it growing up to the NFL and to where you are now.
Well, to put it in the quickest nutshell I can and condense it as quick as possible. I think best way to is to paint a picture of the time frame of when it happened. People use the experiences that we have today, and so when you share some things, they're like, "What? What?" So I'll give you an example. In 1973, I was 8 years old. Okay. It's the first time anybody had ever asked me, "Hey, Merril, what do you want to do? What do you want to be?" And I was 8 years old, and I was thinking, I wasn't frustrated by the question. I was actually intrigued by it. I didn't clearly know what I wanted to do. I was 8 years old. And it got me to thinking and looking around going, wow, what? I mean, I've never thought of that. It's just 8-year-olds mostly don't. So this happens in 1973. My dad was a milkman. He got up at 4:30 in the morning. He went on a route, delivered milk to people who left empty bottles of milk in a container on a porch. You didn't go to the grocery store and get milk back then. It was delivered to you. And in 1973, not everybody had a television. And if you did, it was a box about yay big, an antenna, 2 knobs, 3 channels, no remote. So you had to select the right channel before you got comfortable on the couch. Now, if your parents watched television for you, well, you end up becoming the remote. That's how I think the remotes were invented. But
I recall.
That picture is important because I had never seen football on television. And we had a rule in our home that our television couldn't be on Sundays. And even if the television were on, you're probably only going to get one game. Okay, so that's an important perspective for this reason. I had been playing football in the backyard. I just signed up for it. I was 8 years old, and I just got to sign up for it, and I couldn't have been more excited. And we went to my grandparents' house, and it was a Sunday, and it was shortly after being asked, "What do you want to do? What do you want to be?" And we walked into the kitchen. I looked to my left, and there it is. The Green Bay Packers were playing on television. Now, the big deal wasn't the Packers were playing on television. The big deal was I'd never seen football on television. I now had an answer. I now knew what I wanted to do, knew what I wanted to be. So I started announcing it right away. I'm going to play in the NFL. Anybody ask me, I'm going to play in the NFL. One of 4 things was always said to me right away, right after I said it. "Oh my gosh, how hard that is. Do you know what the odds you playing in the National Football League are? Oh, son, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We wouldn't want you to be disappointed." Or, "Man, that's impossible." So it's things like that, actually, and many others, why I see things through a child's eyes more than most adults. The people who were supposed to encourage me were the first ones to discourage me. But it was my real first taste of resiliency. None of that fazed me, because once I saw it, I was like, that's what I wanted to do. I couldn't. Then when I started playing it, I was like, oh, that's really what I want to do. And I never lost sight of that. A few years later, for whatever reason, we're in class one day, our teacher walks in and she says, "Okay, everybody put your pencils down, set everything down. I want to tell you something. Everybody needs to have goals in their life, and you need to write them down and pin them up in your room, because it's where you start and end your day."
Yeah.
I was 10 years old. I'm like, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard, ever. Then I start thinking, like, man, if I had my own bedroom, here's what I'd have that I'd never seen. I'd have a wall of cork. I start thinking, because I was thinking that's a big, I didn't just think one goal. I had all kinds of goals that I'd write up, because my life was going to be about a journey of goals, and every step was going to lead to another one. But I had a problem. I shared a bedroom with a little brother. We had a bunk bed. So I couldn't put anything on my wall without it coming down. That's why I used to pray diligently he would disappear, because I wanted my own bedroom. But doesn't mean I don't love my little brother. I was passionate about having my own bedroom. If I did, that's what I'd want. Well, a few years later, my dad announces the concrete basement that we used during this time of year, the wintertime, as our playground. We were going to lose it to 2 bedrooms, a family room, and an office space. Now, the good news was one of those bedrooms is going to be mine. Well, I asked him if he'd make me a wall of cork. He asked why. I explained. Anyway, he makes me a wall of cork. It ends up being a half a wall, not an entire wall, but that's where actually the journey began. When I pinned all those goals up, the very top goal was I will play in the National Football League. I picture my favorite player, Walter Payton, and a picture of my favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a symbol of the NFL, and I put it up there. And I have what now I call my first moment of truth in life. It was my first moment of self-reflection. As I looked at the goal, I just started thinking about everything people had said to me, all of, how hard it was and the odds. And I started, the odds are 0.016% of eligible drafted players get drafted in the NFL. Only 30% of those make it. So I don't know what they are from Pocatello, Idaho. I just know they're less. There might be some validity to those people saying the odds were against me, but the more I let them weigh on me, the heavier they became. And for a moment, I would play in the NFL was nothing more than like words on a wall. And I go back to that moment of truth and moment of self-reflection. I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I didn't write that to be words on a wall. Like I wrote it down because I want to achieve it. And that's when my entire world changes, because it's the first time the words "find a way" would pop into my head. Because as I'm generating, well, no, I want to do that. That's why I put it up there. And then the words "find a way" popped into my head. We'll find a way to do it. And man, it's like it sent me on a journey. Like an explosion went off. I mean, I got so excited. I was energized. It's the first time words had ever given me hope. And I wrote, in fact, I moved my goals down. I wrote the words "find a way" and I put that at the top of the wall. And then I started thinking, what can I do? What do I need to do to get there? And it sends me on a journey. But the first person I thought of was Walter Payton. He was my favorite player. I'd heard about all these things he'd done about. I go back to this. Now, this happens in 1977. So this thing we're using right now and this thing, okay, that didn't exist. That phone was bolted onto a wall and there's a cable attached to it. If you're going to go find out information, you had to go to the library. And it sent me on a journey. Those words on that day, and still the days I look over on my board there, because they still resonate with me. They inspired me to do the one thing every human being is responsible for, regardless of your circumstance, regardless of what hand life has dealt you. Do something about your circumstance. Either build on it or change it. You're responsible for that journey, because I think people are smart enough to know what the results will be if you do nothing. We have a responsibility to do something. And I got so excited about doing something. And I could go on for another hour or longer of all the things I learned on the journey, but that sparked me to take action and take ownership of my life and my journey. And I have never forgotten that. And many things I've been taught along the way. I'm a product of a lot of people. People challenged me. People inspired me. I find hope in people. And I wouldn't have much to share with you, quite honestly, if it wasn't for people. But that's where it all started. And they still resonate with me today. They've helped me live a dream and fight to live, and a lot of in between. And they've become a parenting tool, a coaching tool, a business tool. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for that experience. I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I tell people, well, this is the truth of my journey. I have found out more about myself in the darkness of moments than in the light of moments. And I think that might be true with most people. You find out more about who you are and what you're made of when it is all against you, or it looks like doom and gloom. How do you respond to that? Not react to it. How do you respond to it? And that's another thing that I've learned along the journey. Responding to things is a lot more powerful than reacting to things.
That's a powerful story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And maybe that has something to do with the reason why Aaron Rodgers likes to go into the darkness in the off season. But that's maybe a question for a different day.
Well, now listen, I've never done those things. However, I watched one of his things, and What was interesting to me, how I observed it, is the guy's trying to be better.
Yeah.
Well, what's wrong with that? Like, now it might not be your way or my way, but it's his way. And that's why you don't go back to find a way. Find a way is not, my way is not your way, but there is a way for you. People, it comes back at the end of the day, we're going to talk about a bunch of things. It's going to come back to one thing, and that is the greatest tool known to mankind. And that is our mind. This is our greatest weapon, how we feed it, how we produce the patterns and habits we develop. It is who we are. It's who we become. And that is truth. And people that can learn to really control their mind versus their mind controlling them, they can overcome anything and become anything. People that can focus on what they can control and they keep that as their target and they build on that versus what they can't control are a lot more successful and peaceful than people who worry about all these other things that you can't control. And from what I saw in that, that there was a guy trying to learn about what I control. What do I work on? I work on me, take care of me and all the things that are around that. And if I'm better, then maybe I make the area that I live in better. And I just find nothing wrong with that. The more that we do that as people, the better off the world will be.
Well, 1000% about that. One of the things I want to touch on, though, I think you mentioned was as you were growing up and you told people about your dream, they were quick to not so much cut you down, but protect you from what they thought was the truth, which was that's unlikely. That's not going to happen. It's interesting because for me, many kids like you are not, or unlike you, are not so self-motivated. You knew what you wanted. And most people would hear that and they would say, yeah, maybe I should rethink my future. So what I'm curious about is how does someone take that piece of information from someone like a parent or a family member, a family friend, and say, yeah, I'm going to find a way. How do you process that at such a young age?
Well, I'll tell you this, like words and visuals are the most powerful tool that we have as human beings to control our mind. Things that that's why you'll hear a lot about vision boards. I had a vision wall. that's how I didn't know it at that time. And I didn't know all these things. I just performed that very first exercise at age 12, just because of some information a teacher gave me or challenge she gave us. And what that led to. So to really answer your question, I try to go back to that moment of truth. Here's of all the four things that were said to me, the one that is probably so confusing and disturbing is those people who go, hey, we wouldn't want you to be disappointed. Okay,
Right.
wait a minute. Okay, where I will be actually when I'm having that moment of truth in life, when I got to that comment, I remember thinking, oh man, I will be disappointed later in life if I don't try. So I don't want to
Yes.
disappoint myself. Man,
Right.
if I take it, I do everything I can. Here's what I found out. I know of nobody done their very best, give everything they've had that's ever been disappointed. Never. Never had anybody look in the mirror and go, I did my part. You have peace of that. Now you may not have gotten to where you wanted to go. Many times that's happened to me. I've not accomplished what I've set out to do. And then in moments of self-reflection, I go, okay, wait a minute. There's been times that you do everything you could have possibly done on the journey. Most of the time I can say yes to that. And I have peace with that. I'm like, well, you know what? There wasn't anything more I could do. Okay. Then there's obstacles that we just don't control that were part of why I didn't get to where I wanted to go. And I have peace with that because I know this, I could not have done anything more. I got everything out of my God-given abilities. And then there's been other times I'm like, man, yeah, there's a little more. That's why moments of self-reflection are so important. You
Yeah.
can't lie to yourself. You can try to lie to yourself. You can try to make excuses, point fingers, and cast blame, but you make your day easier, tomorrow harder. At the end of the day, the truth is the truth. And that experience as a kid, I just remember going, wait a minute, I would never want to be disappointed. Actually, I thought, I'll be disappointed if I don't try. That's the first thing I thought of. I was like, shoot, disappointment. I know of nobody that hasn't had some disappointment in their life. And without disappointment, you really can't appreciate success and accomplishments. You got to have that balance, and you got to have experience both to really embrace and understand both. And I just remember as a kid, I was just smart enough to go, hey, wait a minute, I'm the one doing this. I'd be disappointed if I didn't do it. And that was the day that I committed to that goal. And I was like, I went all in, and whatever work was required, I was committed to doing it. And nothing was going to deter me from that. Now that wasn't an easy road. I'm not trying to make it sound like after that day it was smooth sailing. I mean, it was an arduous journey of nearly over a decade, you know, 9 years, from, because I was age 12, got drafted when I was 21. And then that was even the start of an opportunity. I was going to make it in the NFL then. I just got drafted in the NFL. I still had to make a team. And I got drafted in the 10th round, not the first round. So the odds are against me again.
It's quite profound that at a young age you were kind of reverse engineering the feedback that most people would say, yeah, you're right. That's a bad goal. I'm going to turn this into rocket fuel. But where I want to go next is I want to learn more about this journey, this find a way journey that you were just starting to manifest and just starting to build as you go through high school. What did that look like? Because, you only started just a few years prior when you said you were 8. So take us through that journey of playing high school and even, moving on to college football.
Well, we all, people who've been through the journey of high school and college, as you reflect back, you're like, man, that journey can be difficult because of peer pressure, influencers that you have that are your friends that are, they have, certain objectives too and things they want to do, and they might not align with yours. Here's the one thing as a young kid two things that I heard as a young kid that really helped me be committed to that goal and not deviate on the wrong path or go about it, leave my journey. Even though I was, have a lot of peer pressure and good friends and people that wanted to do different things on a weekend than I needed to do. One is, I was at the library looking for things on Walter Payton, quite honestly. And I stumbled across a guy named Aristotle. And at the time I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And still this day, I cannot tell you why I chose to read the stuff he had written. But the more I read, the more interested I become. And I come across what ends up being the foundation of my journey, quite honestly. It's a quote that Aristotle made, and it was, "We are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act but a habit." Now, this is how I interpreted it. I knew I had no room for error. And those words again gave me hope because patterns and habits were up to me. The choices I was going to make up to me. And nobody stumbles out of bed and becomes excellent. But man, you can work at it. And that's how I read it. I was like, wow, the truth in that. And it's still true to this day. Any human being ask themselves, what do you repeatedly do? It's who you are. What's great and powerful in that, if you like it, build on it. Because if you don't, being stagnant is a quicksand of life. If you don't like it, you can change it. Just the power now. Go back to the ownership aspect of your life. Don't sit there and go, well, I'm this way because that's how I was raised. And this is, well, that's all you're doing is pointing fingers, casting blame, and making excuses. It's a toxic blender of disaster. Has garnered success by no one ever. Well, that quote really gave me another energy of hope and a way to approach things, patterns and habits. So I knew I had to be committed. How I trained, when I did it, how I did it, and I go back and think of how I used to train back then. I remember when I heard about amino acids. See, now this is like in 1979, 1980. So you got to paint another picture. Amino acids have just come out on the playing field. I mean, I don't even think protein powders had been around, so like as far as nutrition goes and training, it was very, I mean, if you had a universal set in your school, like your school had the greatest gym of all time. And that's like every machine on one machine. So, the people who are like, say, 20 or 25, even 30, they're like, what are you talking about? You thought you had a great gym. So but training was important. So that Aristotle quote, and then another quote that I heard by Walter Payton about a tape he put together called Winning in Life. I got the tape because he was going to talk about his charity work, his family life, and how he trained. And I only cared about how he trained because I was a young kid. And I didn't know there was an interview process, but the interviewer asked him, first question out of the box, what makes you better than everybody else? Now, people who don't know who Walter Payton was, Walter Payton, when he did this tape, was the all-time leading rusher in the NFL, pound for pound, the greatest player to ever play. This was always said about him. He's not the biggest. He's not the fastest. He's not the strongest. He's just the best. That's confusing as a kid because everybody who's bigger, stronger, and faster than me is better than me. So how's he the best in the world? And he's not the biggest, strongest, or fastest. Well, he summed it up pretty quick. After he's asked, what makes you better than everybody else? He paused for a second. He said, because I want it more than they do. Every single day of the week. In the off season, when I go run that hill at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's 80 yards up, 40 degrees and sand-based. I want it more than they do. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. During the season, when there's not 65,000 fans sitting in the stands screaming and yelling for us, I want it more than they do. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Then Sunday at 1 o'clock, when you get to see me, man, you better believe I want it more than they do. I hit pause. That right there is a mindset and a choice any human being can do. It's a relentless approach to something. It's a relentless approach or commitment to something. It doesn't matter what it is, but it goes back. I told you, we will always come back to this. What you program here, what you train here, what you believe in, what you tell yourself, what you believe, what you prepare and practice for every single day. Not when it's convenient for you, not when it works for you, every single day. It is the greatest weapon I've ever developed. After hearing him say that, because that tool can be applied to anything in life. It's not just sports. It can be anything. Challenge comes your way, circumstances, something you are trying to accomplish. It's applicable to everything. But it starts here with that relentless commitment and approach, patterns and habits, and application and action. Grateful for those things because those help me when on Friday people want to go up and take a kegger and go up the hill and drink all night. I was like, well, I can't. I gotta work out. I gotta train. And so they helped me stay on a path that you can fall and erode off of. And they're great lessons as a kid to learn and are critical and pivotal for me in helping me live my dream.
That's an incredible story because everybody needs that reminder that your thoughts, your mindset really is where everything starts, and that controls a lot of other things from there. But I want to move on to, you move on from high school football and beyond. What were some of those additional habits and behaviors that you developed? Because obviously you were very disciplined. You had an elite mindset. You had one clear vision, one clear goal, make it to the NFL. But as you started to grow and develop your skills on and off the field, what were some of those behaviors and mindsets you started to adapt that helped you propel from high school to college and so on?
Well, let me introduce more people into my life because if you really listen to this, you go, has he come up with anything generic or general in his life? No, I haven't. I'm so grateful for people. Now enter Chuck Noll in my life. I'm 21 years old. Chuck Noll is the only coach in NFL history to win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. He's one of the Mount Rushmore coaches of the NFL, one of the greatest leaders, teachers, human beings I've ever been around in my life, and I've never met another man like him. He was great at teaching football. There's no doubt about that. But he was also an outstanding teacher of life. One of the first meetings we ever had, I remember he brought up, football's not your life's work. I remember I heard that. I'm like, what's he talking about? Like, football's not my life's work. I know at this point I've been doing it for the end of my rookie year. So I played 22 years, 13, 14, whatever it is. I'm like, what's he talking about? I'm going to do this the rest of my life. All right. And he was just talking about how important it is that the stage that we have, you use it, don't abuse it. You build off this stage, and your life's work is going to be what you do after this game, not this game. Again, I'm like, what's he talking about? But I was listening. I give myself credit. I was 21 years old, and I was smart enough to know I'll never come across another person like this in my life. I knew it. And I knew that I better take inventory, I better take notes, and I better listen. And I'm so grateful I did, because all of the lessons and challenges that he has, that I experienced in 5 years are largely who I am. I started thinking, well, it's okay, your life's work. Well, geez, what I want to do? And he mentioned, hey, listen, if you got to finish school, go finish school. He goes, if you start it, finish it. And then he would just talk about there's other opportunities, from this. That's why I went to use the stage, don't abuse it. People are going to reach out to you, make sure they're credible. That was another thing that I've never forgotten. He's like, just don't assume everybody's credible. Make sure you tie yourself to people that are credible. Think of that lesson. Think of how important that is for every human being in every scenario. Make sure you got people that are credible. And, if they're going to willing to help you, extend your hand too. This isn't a catering system. And he was just really good at challenging and opening your scope and suggesting stuff. And had he not done that, I probably wouldn't have committed to do all the things I end up doing in the off season and even during the season. And that's how I came across broadcasting. I came across that on accident. A radio station, I had been doing a call-in. One of the first players ever. Another picture, because people go, first guy to ever do a call-in. They're like, everybody does that. Yeah. In 2025.
Yeah.
Not back in not about like in 1988. That was a very foreign thing that players were, TV shows or did radio. You'd heard interviews from, but they didn't do shows or call-ins and stuff. And I did it from the PR station, and the PR offices in Pittsburgh with the Steelers, and another radio station. It actually became popular. People liked hearing another player talk about, or a live play, a current player talk about the upcoming game and the opponent. And so, that station was B94. The rock station DVE reached out to me at an appearance and asked me if I would. Well, first of all, they asked me how much B94 was paying me. Well, I'm dumb, not stupid. I took long enough to not to, because they weren't paying me anything, by the way. I just was doing it for free. They offered me $10,000. Okay, $10,000 in 1988 was like, where do I sign? Now they said, one thing a little different. We would like you to come to the studio on a Monday. Okay, now a Monday after a Sunday game.
Yeah.
That's not the easiest task. And our first meeting's at 8. So that means I got to be at that studio at like 6:30, no later than 7, because I got to be down the stadium by 8. And I'm like, oh man, there ain't no. And then I'm thinking, use the stage, don't abuse the stage. All right, they gave me an opportunity. I'm going to not do it just because it's going to be a little inconvenience for me. And I'm like, you're right, better go. I walk into the studio. Never been in a studio in my life. Don't have any expectations whatsoever. I open the door. Boom. It hits me. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like microphones and all these boards. And I'm like, oh, I knew what I wanted my life's work to be. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I stumbled across it on accident, but through a challenge and doing a due diligence, taking action, being responsible for your journey, not thinking things are just going to fall in your lap and about doing nothing. And that sent me on another journey. And I am grateful for that, or I would have never come across broadcasting.
That another amazing story, Merril. So one of the things you mentioned there was the impact Chuck Noll had on your life and probably a lot of other players.
Oh, yeah.
But where I want to go with this is when you think about the NFL, there's really only a handful of teams that have a culture of excellence. And regardless of winning or losing, typically those teams of a culture of excellence have a history of winning. Doesn't necessarily mean Super Bowl every year, but you've got 49ers, which I see a helmet for in the background, Pittsburgh Steelers, and of course my team, the Green Bay Packers. What is it about organizations like the Steelers that have this culture? Even today with Mike Tomlin, it's no nonsense. It's winning, it's culture, it's family. It's a lot of the things that, for whatever reason, seems like some organizations glaze over.
Well, it's pretty simple. It's ownership. It's the very top, from the chief to Mr. Rooney to Art now. When I first got drafted, I knew that the chief was still alive. The chief passed away in 1988, my second year, but I got to know the chief, and he had a incredible reputation and standard that he modeled. Okay. I think one of the most powerful tools, if not the most powerful tool in leadership, is modeling, especially when words and actions match. Words are strong, action is powerful. You can say one thing and do another, and everybody's going to do what they saw, not what they heard. Period. That's 100% true. But when they match, then you have something. And he was impeccable as he modeled. Mr. Rooney, impeccable as he modeled. Chuck, impeccable as he modeled. Bill Cowher, impeccable as he modeled. Art, impeccable as he models. Mike, impeccable as he models. It starts at the top. And I've known the Rooney, well, shoot, dang near 40 years. And I kind of grew up with Art and Dan Rooney Jr., who's the vice president. I knew Dan very well. He gave me my first opportunity. Mr. Rooney gave me my first opportunity in broadcasting to be the first player in the booth for the Steelers. Most people don't know that.
I didn't know that
because I wasn't there very long, but I was the first player in the booth there before I committed to ESPN full time and had to leave. And they gave me a chance they drafted me and gave me an opportunity to live my dream. And the chief was the first one to tell me that I was a very good football player to go get my schooling done and get back here. And I just have enormous respect for them. I've seen how they've led. They've hired people that they believe and trust in, and then they help build them. They don't interfere with them. Yes, they'll guide them, and they got the final say, but the way they go about business and the way they go about their culture is with consistency and integrity, and those two might be the most critical components of modeling and building and leadership and being successful.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. Modeling is one topic in leadership that I think, for whatever reason, is not discussed very often. It's something that you talk more about in education with children, but often gets glazed over in the leadership world. But I'm curious, you've been around the National Football League for a long time, both as a broadcaster and as a player, and with all your relationships. Again, there's a lot of organizations, but what else differentiates the organization?
Well, I think it's their ability to not panic and reboot or clean house when you have a bad year, a couple of bad years. They do a really good job, I think, of looking at everything, not just one thing. Like Mike Tomlin's under fire now. Everybody wants him fired. Everybody wants him gone. If I looked at the season, I go, yeah, Mike just made a lot of really boneheaded calls. He didn't do, from a leadership perspective, because everybody else was doing it right, and he just kept doing it wrong. But that's not the case. You could go across the organization, and from a player perspective, a performance perspective, in every perspective, execution, there's a lot there that needs cleaned up and fixed. And they believe that, and have believed for a long time, that Mike is the guy that can help clean that up and organize it and grow as a leader. Just because, listen, Chuck Noll got coach of the year 1 year in 1989. He didn't get it during his four Super Bowl wins. He didn't get it through that 70s decade run. He got it when everybody said the game had passed him by. That's when he performed some of his best work at the end of his career, because he kept growing as a leader and a coach and getting better. Just because you've been doing something 20 years, that's where I think the message of Find a Way is also such a pivotal tool. Is it constantly makes me look at, and the message I try to share is look at yourself, like open yourself up. Where are you? Where are you going to go from here? Everybody needs to grow and evolve. Challenge yourself. You do those type of things in life, boy, you grow and evolve. You don't become stagnant. And you get rewarded for that. Nobody hands you an award, but you get rewarded, with things like peace and joy and happiness and just personal success, personal satisfaction, that you sit in there and go, I did my part. So, and I watched Chuck do that. He was as good. He continued to grow as a leader. I think Mike grows as a leader. Bill Cowher grew as a leader. I watched him in his first few years grow as a leader. It was incredible, and that's what the Rooney's believe in. He's like, They don't know how to be a head coach because all these guys became the head coach without head coaching experience. They knew that. That's why they're like, we got to grow with them. We got to help them. And I think that commitment to that is, why they've been what helps them be successful.
It's so funny you say that. Being a Packers fan, I was listening to the end of season press conference from the general manager, Brian Gutekunst, and he literally used that word. We're going to take a holistic approach. He was asked about a player or a coach or something like that. And he said, no, that's what you guys do. We look holistically at the whole thing. And that stood out to me just as someone who likes to understand and consume leadership content. And I think about that. And there was a comment made earlier on maybe the Dan Patrick show, and they were talking about Tomlin. And they said, look, if you fire this guy or, mutually agree to part, said there's going to be dozens and dozens of college teams and probably a dozen plus NFL teams that would say, you know what, we'd rather fire our head coach to get this guy because he's that good. So where I'm getting at with all of this is, you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and they've had like 3 coaches over the last 40 some odd years.
Almost 60.
Yeah, it's unprecedented in professional sports today. So when you say that, they're not going to blow things up after one bad season or one bad play or maybe a bad acquisition, that is something I think, you look at organizations like Cowboys and the Browns, and, I don't want to necessarily name a whole bunch of players or teams, but you look at the organizations of excellence that win year in and year out, they're going to be patient and they're going to, as you say, find a way, aren't they?
Well, you got to realize too, they made it to the playoffs. You know how many teams would wish they would have made it to the playoffs?
Yeah.
I understand they didn't play their best football and they really eroded into the playoffs, but they made it there. They're good enough to make it there. So you're not that far off, but you're not a championship team and you got to reset things and reevaluate things. And I can tell you this, I go back to, reacting versus responding. Fans react. Good leaderships respond. They sit back, they take in all of the information, assess what I can control, what I have control of. And within that scope, I fix that. And that's all you can do. If you can't fix it, don't worry about it. If you can fix it, don't worry about it. And people worry about both. Why? You can fix it. You can't, forget it. So, and I think when you have that type of focus and perspective, you're better off. You make better choices.
Yeah. That brings up a really interesting point. You had posted about something on LinkedIn recently about physical health and mental health. And that is something that I think, I don't care who you are, where you come from, what you have, those are some reminders that everyone needs to have. And you just mentioned what you can and cannot control. I'm curious to hear your perspective on connecting the two, because I personally believe physical health is extremely important. And I probably advocate for mental health more than most people. And I'm just curious to hear that story, if you're open to sharing it, when you were connecting, in your own journey, physical and mental health, and why that's important to you.
Well, listen, probably one of my darkest days. I got several of them, but this preceded being diagnosed with cancer, which is a darkness in itself. But where my career ended, I just went in. I was in the middle of the season. I went into cardiac arrest. I was in intensive care for days. I had to learn how to read again. I was an emotional and a physical and a mental mess. I laid on the couch, I bet you, for several months. And every day, I just eroded further. Where I get the point fingers, cast blame, and make excuses, I got it from this. Because I laid on the couch every day. I was angry at the Bears. I was angry at the medical staff. I had no purpose. I had zero hope. I was in a bad space. My daughter here, this kind of, I think there's a fine line between tragedy and comedy. You got to have a little bit of humor. I would sit and watch with my daughter was 2 years old, and I would sit and watch Barney. Those who people remember Barney,
Yeah.
purple dude. And I'd sit there for hours and watch Barney with her. And she'd suck on her bottle. I remember she had a little tiny chair, and she'd just turn to look at me. She's the only person I could be around. She's the only person that understood me. In fact, I would read to her books, and I would read them like this: I am going. That's how I'd read. But she loved it. And I sat and watched Barney, and I'm like, I like this stuff. I'm like, how can I like this stuff? I'm like, but it tells you, like, I was just in such a bad space. So this goes on for several months. And I can't even leave my house and get back. I couldn't go around the block. I felt like I was completely lost in the woods. That being said, I just remember one day, remember laying on the couch, going through the inventory, casting fingers pointing, casting blame, making excuses. I'm going through my process. I'm doing it. I'm getting more bitter and more angry. And then I have a moment of truth, another moment of truth in life. Like there was almost this little light that was left in me. I just had a little bit of light left. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. You're responsible. You need to get off the couch. You need to do something about your circumstance. Very similar, but that one was towards a goal, a dream I had. It wasn't digging myself out of the gutter that I had been put in, not by myself, keep in mind. So I got every reason to point fingers, cast blame. I got all the evidence. I didn't do it. What's irrelevant? It's irrelevant who did it. The responsibility that I took on that day was actually the thing I'm probably most proud of myself, showed the most about me, is that I got off the couch. I got off the couch. Lynn Swan had been calling me because I told you I'd worked at different areas of broadcasting. I was in Chicago at the time. I was doing a Monday night radio show at Walter Payton's place. I did the post and pregame show for CBS. That was part of why I went to Chicago, because I had been building my network of broadcasting. And now listen, that all fell apart because it was during the season. So I didn't have that ability to go do that stuff because I was, cognitively, I just wasn't functioning right. But he'd try to call me. I remember I got asked several times. The Steelers called me. They go, hey, Lynn Swan's been trying to call you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And then knowing that he was trying to call me even made me more like angry and like and this is really, an awful attitude. It was awful. Just kept beating myself up, pounding myself. But that day I decided, you know what? Get your butt off the couch. Get your butt off the couch and make the first call to Lynn Swan and return his call. Ironically, they were going to be in Illinois. Michigan was coming to Illinois and invited me to come down and just he's going to host me for a couple of days. As I just kind of shadowed them throughout their meetings and the game. And that was the start of it. Now, I don't really get completely dug out of I didn't say, okay, I'm not saying on that day things changed. Okay. And that was the most significant part of what I did with where I was. I did something to help myself. And that is a requirement for everybody. That doesn't mean you don't need help as well. I needed that as well. Like that Lynn Swan helped me so much. And so many other people helped me along the journey, but I initiated a lot of it. I returned a lot of it, and I took the responsibility to get off the couch. And that is such a critical component. And because I know people go, well, I didn't do this. I didn't either. The medical doctor didn't properly care for me. I didn't do that. There's nothing I did wrong in the whole process. Okay, well, that's not going to change the situation. Now, that's what I kept telling myself, but every day I kept taking inventory. I'm on the couch, and I'm getting worse off. So there is an ownership responsibility when we're in a state to make changes, and where we are and doing that and taking action and getting movement and seeking help, reaching out for help. And that was a big lesson for me. That was one of my greatest accomplishments that I've ever had. And I reflect on it often. And that's why I share it often, because people can get caught up in pointing fingers and casting blame and making excuses. It's a toxic blender of disaster. You're just going to sit and blend in it. You're not going anywhere in it. You're not going to be successful in it. At some point, you got to push the switch off, get out of it, and press forward in something else. And you're in charge of that. Most people that are depressed, they're thinking about the past and things that they can't fix or change or probably have nothing to do with. And a lot of people with anxiety are worried about the future and things that are probably never going to happen. But it comes back to what? This right here, how we program ourselves, how we think of things. And that probably helped me become stronger mentally than any point in my life because of that shift, that strength and that shift to get off the couch. It was the hardest thing, one of the things I've ever done. But man, when I did it, I never looked back. I remember I turned around from that couch, I ain't going back to that couch. And I never went to that couch again. And every day I got a little better. I started creating a better route of getting back to a routine and developing things that worked in my favor. And that's that's everybody can do that. You can do that. And if everybody's like, no, I can't, well, then you know what, you're right, you can't. But if you said you can, you're also right. So it's still on you. It's still on you for the first steps. But then yes, rely on help and other people that can help you, because it will help you continue in the right direction.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I think that's powerful. And I also believe that whether you want to admit it or not, most people don't want to acknowledge this when they're in a dark place, but everyone's been there at some point. Everyone has their ups and downs. And sometimes you like you say, you have to get off the couch and you have to do something to advocate yourself. And sometimes, like you said, it doesn't fix the problem, but it's the start of something good. Turn the phone call, open the door, because as I always say, you never know what opportunity is waiting for you on the other side. And obviously good things happen there. So we could talk football, Merril, for hours, obviously talk about the NFL. I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about that. But before we wrap this up, when you started talking, you talked a lot about vision, and vision is something we talk a lot about at the Hustle Nation. And I want to try to encapsulate your thoughts on it for a couple of reasons. Number one, as we record this, we're at the start of a new year, and there is never a bad time, but there's never been a better time to craft your vision. So if someone's out there and they want to make 2025 their best year yet, why is it they need to have a vision? And yours was find a way to get to the NFL.
Well, this is actually true. This is, you need to do some research on it. There's science on this. This still comes back down to this thing here, how we program this, how we feed this. This is foundational truth. This is one of the most powerful things any human being can do. They can take their thoughts and turn them into words and goals. Those words and goals, you put them up where you start and end your day, will inspire action. Your actions are eventually going to lead to patterns and habits. And then those patterns and habits are going to build who you are and who your character is. And that's why if you don't like the path you're on, you can change that. You don't. Now, if you choose to get stuck, that's in that you chose that, but you can change it. When you're 2 feet, I always tell people every morning when you're 2 feet, you get up and your 2 feet hit the ground, man, you're in charge. You're in charge of your journey. How you're approaching the day right now, how you think you're going to attack the day, how you already programming yourself, the routines and things and choices you're going to make to start your day, to invest in yourself. Like I'm a big believer. Go back to leadership, because at the end of the day, you're the leader of yourself. Okay. So how do you want to lead yourself? One of the most important things, if you're going to be a really good leader, man, invest in yourself. Give yourself some time that you take care of yourself. Now, what I mean by that often is, how do we invest in ourselves from a healthy aspect? The foods we eat, how much we eat, what kind of exercise are we doing? Are we challenging ourselves and keeping ourselves in shape and healthy? Because I can tell you this from experiences I've had and the challenges I've had health-wise, there were two things that were to our advantage and my advantage. One is early diagnosis, and one is your overall health. Your overall health is going to come to your rescue more times than you could probably ever imagine it. The problem with that, if you don't have overall health, you can't run down to Target and get it when you need it. It's valuable that you have it at all times. And listen, if you never need it, good for you. In the worst case scenario, you just live a healthier, happier, peaceful life. Things are easier. Life is easier. So there's more enjoyment in it. You can do more things, stay more active. I mean, there's no negatives to taking care of yourself and invest in yourself. And when we invest in our body and we take care of it, that's, people often forget, like, this is attached to it. Okay, this is we don't just put it off onto the side and then we work out. I mean, this, our brain and our brain health is a part of that. That's why, like, when you hear about, well, brain health is oxygen, blood flow, all these, well, that's why you work out. You move your body. The more we move, and our bodies are meant to move, the healthier and more resilient that they become and that they stay. And if you want to keep youth, invest in your body, and you can keep that. And when you're a healthier, better leader, man, it's just so much better for everybody else. And that is a belief I've had. If there's one thing that I am probably most passionate about, and it was my first passion as a kid, it wasn't even football. It was health and fitness. I saw two things happen to me as a young kid. Before I saw football on television, I saw a comic book, and I saw Spider-Man and Hulk Hogan. I mean, I think it was the Hulk. It was, but anyway, they were just built. I was like, holy cow! Like, how do you get those muscles? I'm like, how do they get those muscles? And so I started asking questions, like, how do they get them? I mentioned the amino acid thing. That's where the amino acid thing came, because I started taking amino acids thinking that was going to build my muscles because of just the overall ignorance I had at the time. But I was at a summer party, and I remember these two couples talking. There was the son and the father. They were walking on the other side of the pool, and the kid was like, he was Mr. Everything, athlete, football, basketball, track. I mean, he could do everything. Just looked like a supermodel. He was built. I mean, he was like put together. And everybody goes, man, he used to look just like that, about the dad. And he had a big beer gut, heavy. And I'm like, what happened? And honestly, when I remember thinking, I'm like, does that just happen? Or, how does that happen? I just remember as a kid, I was like, wow, I remember thinking that was the first thought I had, is, how does that happen? And that kept my attention into, how does that happen? Do you just, nothing you can do about that? And obviously later on in life, I found there's a lot you can do about that. You don't have to go to that extent. What happens, and I understand, in high school, everybody's active, you're doing things, then you get college, you get a little more committed to doing a job, and you start losing your activity, and then you get a family, and then you really lose it, and you forget to invest in yourself. And it makes you better for your family too. I think if you got kids, greatest leadership role you're ever going to have is that. I could care less how many people, how big a company you run. Your kids and being a dad and a parent is the greatest leadership role you'll ever do and ever have. So, and that's where I actually started reprogramming when I invested in myself. I used to work out later in the afternoon, once I had kids, I found out one day, I was like, man, I didn't even work out. And I'm like, because I was so busy and I'm like, okay, but then I better get up and get going and take care of myself before I have to get my kids up. And that's when I started to change how I went about investing in myself. But I've never lost sight of that. And I'm so grateful for it. Diagnosed with cancer. First thing he said, your health might save you. Open heart surgery, well, your health, that might save you. When I was in intensive care after, my career ended in Chicago, they're like, your overall physical health is probably going to help you. Saved me so many times. It's been a valuable weapon in all aspects of life. And I will always invest in it. It will get my full attention. And I give it anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours every day.
I love that mindset and that mentality, because I too had cancer at a young age, and I feel better now in my 40s, my mid 40s, than I did in my early 30s. When you wake up in the day and your priority is your mental and physical well-being, it is amazing how things change. Your mindset, your memory, your performance, a lot of things change as a byproduct without really doing anything other than getting up and getting physical, getting in shape. So that's a great message everyone needs to hear. But Merril, we got to wrap this up pretty soon, but I got to ask you a couple quick hitting football questions. So number one, who was the biggest influence on you as a player in the NFL? Who was maybe the best leadership locker room guy
that I played with? Or, well, I'll tell you
doesn't matter.
the guy who impacted me the most and significantly was Walter Payton.
Did you get to meet him?
Yeah, oh yeah, I got to meet Walter my rookie year. Just a real quick story, because I probably think of Walter Payton one time a week at least because of this, and it is one of the most, if not the most important thing you can do to a human being, too. By the way, so the game was over. We played preseason games. My second preseason game. My goal was to meet Walter Payton. I wanted to tell him how, I ran dirt hills. I watched the tape I had watched where that mindset and that changed my life. I had a whole host of things I wanted to share with him, but to be on the same field with him, from over a decade watching him and to play with him was just extraordinary. Well, we lose 50-0. So I'm heading to the locker room. I never saw Walter Payton. I lost sight of him after the game was over. But something said, hey, look to your left. I looked to my left, and he's walking right in the middle. He's like right in the C in Chicago, on Soldier Field. I went running over to him, and the first thing that caught me off guard is that I was bigger than him. I'm 6'1", about 220 at the time, and he's 5'10", 205. So that took me back because I had this cat built to like. And then when I watched him play, I was like, man, he's all that. I reached my hand out, and I said, Mr. Payton, my name's Merril Hoge. And I went into the dissertation of the running the dirt hills, watching the tape, and I went to a whole bunch of things. The Chicago Bear lamp that I had next to my bed that I have still sitting over there. And I really never scripted it or reviewed it or went through it enough to button it up nicely and thank him. So I said, hey, could I get an autograph? Well, nobody's carrying a pen with us, first of all. And I'm not an autograph guy either. I just asked that out of sheer panic. I've never been an autograph guy. I think he's the only one I've ever asked, though, too, by the way. And he said, he paused for a second. The first thing he did, he remembered my name. He said, hey, Merril, I want to thank you for taking the time to come over here and tell me that. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. He said, I don't have a pen on me right now. He goes, but why don't you take these? Takes his elbow pads off, his wristbands off, and his headband off. And he said, why don't you take these? Man, that was better than an autograph, bro. But I was like, I hung the moon, man. I was like the MVP of the Super Bowl. And I go back to how he made me feel. Like he made me. Was it the best thing Walter Payton has ever heard? Absolutely not. Absolutely. Well, that's the best Walter Payton. No, but that's not what he said to me on that day. And how he made me feel, I've never forgot that. And he didn't need to. He just didn't need to. And that's even more speaks to who he was and the value in how you can handle people. And I never forgot it. And many times when, somebody runs up on you and it's not the right timing, I just think about him. I'm like, how would he handled me like I caught him out of the blue. He was heading the locker room. He's all telling me to rush. It's a preseason game. He's like, he's got nothing to do with this thing. Let's get out of here. And he listened to me. And then he made me feel amazing. And I've never forgot that. And then when I got to Chicago, I eventually got the autograph I was talking about. That's a whole other story. But Walter Payton was everything anybody would ever describe him to be. He was a fabulous human being, pound for pound, the greatest football player to ever play, still this day.
Do you still have the sweatbands, elbow pads?
Yes. In fact, I kept them in my locker, my bag locker. But that's Walter Payton's signature on my Rydell helmet that they wanted me to wear that I wouldn't wear, and then he signed it, and then they never asked me to wear it.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting Walter Payton signed that helmet eventually.
That's cool. All right. Last one. Favorite NFL moment outside of that one?
Okay, well, because that was sometimes I use that as my favorite moment, to be honest with you. My favorite moment. Well, I'll never forget. running out on the field my rookie year for my very first game against the San Francisco 49ers. That one I'll never forget. We were a very young team. San Francisco won the Super Bowl. They're supposed to win it again. And we start opening day with the San Francisco 49ers. I actually make the biggest play in the game against Ronnie Lott to help us win the game. And that year, San Francisco went 15-1. We were the only team to beat them during the regular season. That first game in my career, I've never forgot. That one that still stands out, and who we beat and the players that we had to play against to beat was probably one of it's still a very fond memory of my career.
Those are amazing stories. Thank you for sharing those with us. Before I let you go, Merril, let's talk a little bit about your books and what you've got going on, because your career's changed a lot. Now you're helping businesses and business leaders through some of your keynote speaking, your books, your curriculum. Talk a little bit about that for a moment.
Well, speaking is my primary passion, and Find a Way is really a message of hope and what's possible for people, especially when they realize the tools they do possess, they take ownership of their journey, and they develop habits and patterns to help them move forward in whatever direction they're going or challenge they're dealing with. And when you feel people take that, and when you hear them respond, I don't think there's a greater feeling than that, is that because all these people I've just shared, they've helped me in so many ways, and I'm so grateful for them. And that's what moves me about being able to share a message with people, is there might be something missing in their journey, or that they've never heard of before. They hear for the first time, they're like, oh, I get that. My teacher walking in and going, hey, right, everybody needs goals, write them down and put them up in your room. It's where you start and end your day. I was like, wow, never heard of that. And if you could give somebody something to help them on their journey, I always say this, that life is the greatest team game. Individually we're strong, we have our strengths, but man, collectively we are powerful if we share them and we learn from each other. And that's what the message is about, is really to empower people of what's possible, especially if they take ownership of their journey, they create patterns and habits that work for them, and they're relentless to that. Then they can overcome anything and become anything. And that is a fact. And when they start doing that and applying it, that's when you see great growth in people and change in people. And that is my biggest passion right now, that I still do stuff with the Steelers and help run a way to play program with the NFL. But if somebody said, hey, listen, you got to pick one, I'll pick speaking and go speak.
I get it. I'm with you on that one. What about your books, your services? Where can people find you? Where can they grab a copy of that book?
Well, thanks. They just go to merrilhoge.com. It's MERRILHOGE. My ancestors, they don't know how to spell. No two L's, no D. I know, but it's merrilhoge.com. And Find a Way is there. Brainwash is there. And you can get a hold of me too in any other source for speaking or otherwise.
You're on LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram too, and all the other platforms. Because I'm not I'm more passionate about LinkedIn than most things, but I do post on all platforms.
Well, Merril, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Love the stories, love the connection to football and life. And I think these are some messages and stories that people need to hear. So we appreciate your time. To all the listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Catch you on the flip side. Peace.